Good morning.
Good morning.
You may have noticed we've had, I think, 3 or 4 consecutive days of sunshine in Pittsburgh in February. So I'd like us to start off by singing a song of thanks. Please rise in body or spirit. We'll do this call and response style. I will sing a phrase and then you repeat after me. Oh, we give thanks.
Oh, we give thanks
For this precious day.
for this precious day.
We're all gathered here.
We're all gathered here.
And those far away.
Those far away.
For this time we share.
For this time we share.
With love and care.
With love and care.
Oh, we give thanks.
Oh, we give thanks
For this precious day.
for this precious day.
Oh, we give thanks.
Oh, we give thanks
For this precious day.
for this precious day.
We're all gathered here.
We're all gathered here.
And those far away.
Those far away.
For this life we share.
For this life we share.
With love and care.
With love and care.
Oh, we give thanks.
Oh, we give thanks
For the precious day.
for the precious day.
Oh, we give thanks.
Oh, we give thanks
For this precious day.
for this precious day.
We're all gathered here.
All gathered here.
And those far away.
Those far away.
For these gifts we share.
These gifts we share.
With love and care.
With love and care.
Oh, we give thanks.
Oh, we give thanks
For this precious day.
for this precious day.
Thank you. Please be seated.
Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the South Hills, also known as Sunnyhill. Our mission is to create a more just and compassionate community within and beyond our walls. My name is Krista Stanley, and I serve as a worship associate for this congregation. If you are a newcomer today, please feel free to visit our welcome table in the fellowship hall, where you can find more information about our congregation, and you can sign up to receive The Beat, our weekly email newsletter. And also, if you'd like to be greeted as a newcomer today after the service, please take a red mug, and members will seek you out to make sure that you are warmly welcomed. A gentle reminder to everyone, if you have cell phones or other electronic devices with you, please silence those now, so our time together will not be disrupted by buzzing or ringing. If you have a restless infant or toddler with you today and need a place to take a break outside the sanctuary, we do have an infant care room in the back corner, which you can access from the hallway, where you can still see and hear the service. As you may have noticed, we have a new art display in the sanctuary created by Constance Merriman, which will be up through the end of April. This display includes life-size figures from the Artist Refugee series, as well as other drawings, paintings, and pastels. Connie will be here to talk about her work informally after today's service during coffee hour. Also, as you may have heard, our annual service auction will take place on March 28th. All physical items donated for the auction must be submitted by next Sunday, March 1st. So please get those physical auction items here this week. Some examples of some auction items. For instance, the board just donated their basket, including some really impressive items. It's called Night on the Town. Your evening will begin with dinner at Altius, boasting some of the best seasonally inspired dishes and most epic views in all of Pittsburgh. After you have delighted your taste buds, it will be time to head downtown for a show staged by the Pittsburgh Cultural Trust. Choose from world-class dramas, side-splitting comedies, ballet, Broadway, jazz, and more. After the show, you can stop by the James Beard nominated Butcher and the Rye for dessert or to sample some of their walls of 600 whiskeys. In this night, all the best of Pittsburgh will be yours. The basket includes a $200 gift certificate for Altius, $200 gift certificate for the Pittsburgh Cultural Trust, $50 gift certificate for Butcher and the Rye, $60 gift certificate for Uber to get you safely home from Butcher and the Rye. And if you're interested in learning more about the auction or some other great items that will be up for grabs, please visit the Sunnyhill Service auction table in the Fellowship Hall. Also, later in today's service, we will have a designated offering to support Pittsburgh for immigrant children. If you're writing a check, please make it out to Sunnyhill or UUCSH with immigrant children in the memo line. Our opening words were written by Tracy Bleakney. A child journeys far from home, fearful and brave, in need of safe harbor. Guided by the light of compassion, may we seek to understand the causes of flight, like the comfort of a candle flickering in a window of darkness. Let us welcome this child into our home with warmth, nourishment, and love. Would we not want the same for our own child, lost and alone in a strange land? Please join me in saying the words for lighting our chalice. We kindle our chalice, symbol of life-saving refuge, that our flame might become a beacon of welcome for friends and strangers alike.
Please rise and body your spirit. For him, I've got peace like a river.
time for our story. If you'd like to come forward, please come up now. And as the children come up, those of you who are standing at the back who might want to have a seat, there should be some empty seats available. Okay. Good morning. How's everybody doing? Good? Isn't it great to have this sunshine? I just can't get over it. This is a story about a young woman who was the queen of an island country. The whole country was on this one tiny little island, and she was the queen. And even though she was young, she was still very wise, and she was very well respected by all of her people. But one day, one of her advisors came into her and said, "Your Majesty, we have a serious problem." And she said, "What's that?" He said, "Well, the people of this island are good people, but the people who live on the next island over are not good people. In fact," he said, "they are our enemies. And as long as we have enemies, we can never be safe." And the queen said, "Oh my, enemies." She said, "Is there anything that we can do about it? Do you have some ideas?" And the advisor said, "Indeed, I do have some ideas." He said, "I propose that we take our army, put them on a large ship, sail to the next island over, take them off of the ship, and have them destroy our enemy." Well, the queen thought this was a little bit extreme, but she said to the advisor, "I don't know, give me a day to think about it, and come back tomorrow, and I'll give you my answer." So the next day, the advisor came back, and he saw the queen sitting down and having tea with the queen from the next island over. And the advisor was so angry that he got red in the face, and he said, "I can't believe this. You're having tea with that woman, the leader of our enemies? How could you do such a thing?" And the queen said, "You know, you've been a good advisor, and I listened to what you say very carefully. And you're right, we do need to get rid of our enemies. But," she said, "sometimes the best way to get rid of our enemies is to make them into our friends. And that is what I am trying to do." So, it's not always possible to be friends with everybody. That just can't happen. But anytime we start thinking of some other people as being the enemies, I think it's good for us to at least try to sit down and talk with them and see what we can work out. And with that, we're going to sing you out to your RE classes.
Peace, no, our love is with you.
dreamed I was dying. I dreamed that my soul rose unexpectedly, and looking back down at me, smiled reassuringly. And I dreamed I was flying. And high up above, my eyes could clearly see the Statue of Liberty sailing away to sea. And I dreamed I was flying. Come on the ship they call the Mayflower. Come on a ship that sailed the moon. We come in the age's most uncertain hour and sing an American tune.
But it's all right, it's all right, it's all right. We can't be forever blessed. Still tomorrow's gonna be another working day. I'm trying to get some rest. That's all I'm trying to get some rest.
Good morning. My name is Angela Klein, and I am a member of the pastoral care team, whose task it is to reach out to members of Sunnyhill going through difficult life events, whatever they may be, offering the loving presence that binds our community together. If you want to get in touch with us, you may contact us directly or call the church office or send an email to pastoralcare@sunnyhill.org. Each week at this time in the service, we share joys and sorrows submitted by members of the congregation. We share the things that we are celebrating as well as the things that we are mourning, so that they do not need to be held alone. Joys and sorrows may be submitted online from our website or handwritten and submitted at the welcome table in the fellowship hall. After each joy or sorrow that I read, please respond by saying, "We hold you in our hearts." I have a sorrow from Sandy Hallett. Sandy writes, "My mother-in-law has started cancer treatments 5 days a week for the next 7 weeks. She is a believer in the power of prayer. I'm asking for healing thoughts and prayers for her. At 88, it will be tough going, but she is a tough lady and we expect a positive outcome. To Sandy and her family, we hold you in our hearts." And we have a joy from Jimmy McClure Neff. Jimmy writes, "My husband Dan received his final PET scan results and he is now cancer-free. We want to thank the entire congregation for all your love and support while he was going through treatment. To Jimmy and Dan, we hold you in our hearts." Let us take a moment of silence to bear in mind these joys and sorrows, as well as those that are held too closely to be shared. All we have carried through the seasons of our lives has brought us here to this place made sacred by our coming together. May we hold all that we carry in the warm embrace of this loving community.
On February 19, 1942, President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, which resulted in the incarceration of more than 110,000 people of Japanese ancestry in American detention camps. 2/3 of the people in the camps were full U.S. citizens, either naturalized or born on American soil. During the war, no Japanese Americans were ever charged, much less convicted, of espionage or sabotage against the United States. Yet they were targeted, rounded up, and imprisoned for years simply for having the face of the enemy. Decades later, the American government, through an act of Congress, admitted that the so-called internment camps were the result of race prejudice, war hysteria, and a failure of political leadership, and that there was, in fact, no evidence that any of those incarcerated were involved in espionage or other wrongdoing. I'm lighting a special candle this morning in observance of the Day of Remembrance for Japanese Americans who were imprisoned unjustly during World War II, in hope and determination that we will stop repeating the shameful mistakes of our country's past. Please join me in the spirit of meditation or prayer. Where is love in the midst of fear? Where is hope in the midst of despair? Where is peace in the midst of struggle? Where is joy in the midst of sorrow? How heavily these questions weigh on our hearts. How fervently we wish for their resolution. How wearily we bear their burden. How ardently we long for something else. In this place, at this time, among those gathered around us, let us hold these tensions tenderly together. Let us consider them in the context of our shared lives. Let us take a moment of silence simply to breathe and to be. In the midst of fear and despair, in the midst of struggle and sorrow, may we always remember that there is more. More love, more hope, more peace, more joy. And may this love, this hope, this peace, this joy be enough now and always. Amen. The short film we're about to watch, Beacon, was created last year by Sunnyhill member Claire Poland. This film, just 3 minutes in length, delivers a powerful message about immigration and inclusion, and has recently racked up several awards, including the Best Animation Award at last year's Humano International Human Rights Film Festival. We're all extremely proud of Claire, and so happy to be able to screen this film, which you can also stream online at Vimeo. Here now is Beacon.
Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land. Here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that twin cities frame. ancient lands, your storied pomp, cries she with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door.
Claire, could you stand up for just a second, please, so people can recognize you? One of the most glaring moral failures of our government in recent years, and God knows there have been a lot of them, has been the issue of United States immigration officials separating immigrant children from their parents. It's a policy that was supposed to have stopped a year and a half ago, but which is actually continuing even today. To call attention to this abhorrent practice, a United Methodist Church in Claremont, California, made a change to their usual nativity scene in front of their building during this past Christmas season. As described by Cynthia Lindner of the University of Chicago Divinity School, instead of the traditional tableau featuring the infant Jesus lying in a manger with parents Mary and Joseph looking on in love and wonder, the Claremont congregation portrayed the Holy Family as border detainees separated from one another in chain-link cages topped with barbed wire. Here's a picture of that nativity scene. When the church administrators shared this photo on their Facebook page, they received 15,000 shares and more than 4,000 comments in one day. This is an example of a church working for justice by disrupting business as usual and bringing attention to an issue that must be faced and resolved. It's an example of a church afflicting the comfortable rather than comforting the afflicted. Both of those functions of the church, the prophetic and the pastoral, are important. But when our government's policies and actions are morally reprehensible, the church must sometimes act in a disruptive, prophetic way so that the issue is not forgotten or merely hidden from public view. But how did things get this bad? How did the United States government get into the business of separating family members from one another? And why is it our problem? It is our problem as a religious community because it goes against our most important values and principles. It is our problem as a country because it is illegal and immoral and because the entire migrant crisis is to a great extent a result of decades of harmful U.S. policies and actions. For a very long time, the United States has meddled in the affairs of Central American countries, much to the detriment of most citizens of those countries. For example, in Honduras, as reported by journalist Rebecca Gordon, in the 1980s, the United States supported a military-run government that routinely disappeared and tortured its opponents, while the CIA used the country as a training ground for the Contras it backed, who were then fighting the Sandinistas across the border in Nicaragua, who had recently deposed their own US-backed dictator. Gordon continues, by the turn of the century, however, things were changing in Honduras. In 2006, Jose Manuel Zelaya became president. Although he'd run on a conservative platform, he promptly launched a program of economic and political reforms. These included free public education, an increased minimum wage, low-interest loans for small farmers, the inclusion of domestic workers in the Social Security system, and a number of important environmental regulations. In 2009, however, a military coup deposed Zelaya, installing Porfirio Lobo in his place. 4 of the 6 officers who staged the coup were graduates of the United States' notorious School of the Americas, where for decades Latin American military officers and police were trained in the ways of repression and torture. Washington may not have initiated the coup, Gordon says, but within days, then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and the Obama administration had given it their seal of approval, supporting that power grab in defiance of the Organization of American States and the United Nations. Since then, murder rates in Honduras have skyrocketed while corruption and drug trafficking have flourished as the drug cartels and local governing bodies, as well as the national government, melded into a single countrywide nightmare. In fact, in large part because of harmful U.S. interventions in various forms, the murder rates in all 3 of the Northern Triangle countries, El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, are among the highest in the world. In the United States, our murder rate is about 5.3 murders per 100,000 inhabitants. In El Salvador, it's 83 per 100,000, the highest in the world, with Honduras coming in second at 57 murders per 100,000, and Guatemala coming in 10th with 27. So on average, if you live in one of these 3 countries, you are at least 10 times more likely to get murdered than you are if you live in the U.S. While the United States may not be directly responsible for all these deaths, it has played a big role, not just in propping up violent dictators and supplying arms, but also in creating the demand for drugs that fuels the drug cartels and in continuing harmful environmental practices and corporate exploitation that have also driven the current migrant crisis. In El Salvador, for example, while Salvadoran citizens live with strict water rationing because of a drought, the US-based multinational Coca-Cola remains immune to such rules. That company continues to take all the water it needs to produce and sell its fizzy concoction locally while pouring foul-smelling effluvia into nearby rivers. In Honduras, again as reported by Rebecca Gordon, environmental degradation and resulting migration are exacerbated by greed in the form of shrimp farming, which decimates coastal mangrove trees that normally help to keep those lands from eroding. Shrimp, the most popular seafood in the United States, comes mostly from Southeast Asia and Central America. Whether it's shrimp or drugs, the point is that U.S. desires continue to drive devastation in Central America, which then leads to refugees and migration. Two of the most violent street gangs in Central America, MS-13 and the 18th Street Gang, both originated in the United States. So even much of the organized crime in this part of the world comes from the U.S. In short, the United States, its corporate greed, its incessant political meddling, its demand for drugs, its propensity for violence, is responsible for much, if not most, of the current migrant crisis. And yet, we as a country tend to shrug our shoulders and say it's not our problem. It is, in fact, very much our problem. And it seems like the very least that we could do as a nation would be to welcome refugees from the countries which have been made in some ways inhabitable as a result of our actions. But instead, we have slammed the door shut. As reported by Sonia Nazario in the New York Times, the Trump administration has cut the maximum number of refugees allowed this year to 18,000, down from 110,000 in the final year of the Obama administration. Last October, not one refugee was admitted, at a moment when nearly 71 million people have been forcibly displaced from their homes, the most since World War II. The Trump administration has barred asylum seekers from entering the United States to make their claim, as our law says they are entitled to do, instead forcing them to line up for months and await their turn at an official port of entry on the Mexican side of the border. Even when they get to the head of the line, they can be turned back. Since January 2019, we have sent more than 57,000 asylum applicants, including at least 16,000 children, back into Mexico's borderlands to wait until their court date. Nazario goes on, it's dead winter, and their only shelter is often a few taped-together trash bags. They are at the mercy of cartels and kidnappers who see them as easy prey. A lawyer in Laredo, Texas, recently stated that more than half of the migrants she has interviewed have had someone in their family kidnapped, extorted, or assaulted by drug cartels while waiting just across the border in Nuevo Laredo, a place so dangerous, the U.S. State Department compares it to Syria, North Korea, or Yemen. One asylum officer who resigned in protest told the Los Angeles Times that we are literally sending people back to be raped and killed. And on top of all that, as I mentioned earlier, we are continuing the policy of separating border-crossing children from their parents. As author and journalist John Washington writes, the separations, part of a series of policy changes to limit immigration and effectively shutter refugee and asylum programs, stemmed from the so-called zero-tolerance policy that began in El Paso in 2017 and was rolled out border-wide in the spring of 2018. The administration had announced that it would seek to prosecute all people who illegally cross the border, despite the fact that, according to U.S. law, it is not illegal for an asylum seeker to cross the border. But it later emerged that the government had specifically targeted families. A strict zero-tolerance policy prosecuting every individual who was apprehended was always beyond capacity. The focus on families was part of a distinct effort by the Department of Homeland Security and the White House to try and dissuade more people from coming to the United States by subjecting parents and children to the terror of separation. In other words, the United States government, in implementing and continuing the policy of separating children from parents, has been, in effect, engaging in what amounts to state-sponsored terrorism. Furthermore, Washington says, the government has admitted that more than 1,100 additional families have been separated since the executive order and court injunction rescinding the separation policy that were issued in June 2018, bringing the total number of children impacted to at least 5,446. That number may still be an undercount and will continue to rise if immigration officials' current practices continue. Each day that our government continues these unjust, immoral, and inhumane policies, our nation's soul dies a little more. Being human is not contingent on borders. In fact, our shared humanity should make borders largely irrelevant as a moral issue. I am not saying that we should simply erase all borders, but I am saying that our care and concern for humanity cannot stop with our own citizens or at our own borders, especially when much of the suffering of those at and beyond our borders is the result of our own greed and exploitation. But what can we do? That's the question we keep coming back to, isn't it? First of all, we can vote. You may have heard that this is an election year. And will we all vote?
Yes.
Yes, we will. And we'll do all we can to turn out the vote in one of the most important election cycles in our nation's history. Second, we can educate and advocate. Burying our heads in the sand is not a good long-term option. Not if we want to be decent, responsible human beings. So we have to keep ourselves informed about what's happening, even when it may be extremely painful to us. And we need to advocate for changes to harmful and immoral policies and practices. Our elected officials must be held accountable for every vote or lack thereof that leads to more pain and suffering for those who are at our borders or being held within our borders. Finally, we can support the organizations that are doing the hard work to advocate and support those who are most acutely affected by the current migrant crisis. Organizations like Pittsburgh for Immigrant Children, from whom we'll hear more in just a few minutes. Remember that we, as Unitarian Universalists, affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person, regardless of race, ethnicity, or country of habitation or origin. We believe and have always believed that advocating for those who are marginalized and oppressed is not just a nice thing to do, but is our responsibility. There's a poem that I'd like to share with you that was written by a Salvadoran journalist and poet, Roque Dalton, who became caught up in the civil war in El Salvador and was executed by the government there in 1975. The poem is titled Como Tu, or Like You, and it beautifully articulates our shared humanity and our shared responsibility to join in the struggle for life and liberty with those who are oppressed. I'd like us to hear the poem first in its original Spanish, and then I will read an English translation. Here to read the poem in Spanish is Ale Avila.
Yo, como tú, amo el amor, la vida, el dulce encanto de las cosas, el paisaje celeste de los días de enero. También mi sangre fluye, y río por los ojos que han conocido el brote de las lágrimas. Creo que el mundo es bello, que la poesía es como el pan para todos, de todos, y que mis venas no terminan en mí, sino en la sangre unánime de los que luchan por la vida, el amor, las cosas, el paisaje y el pan, la poesía de todos.
Like you, I love love, life, the sweet smell of things, the sky blue landscape of January days, and my blood boils up, and I laugh through eyes that have known the buds of tears. I believe the world is beautiful, and that poetry, like bread, is for everyone, and that my veins don't end in me, but in the unanimous blood of those who struggle for life, love, little things, landscape and bread, the poetry of everyone. I hope and pray that we might always find ways to love the sweetness of life, and that we might also find ways to work in solidarity with those who struggle for life, so that its poetry and sweetness might be known and savored by everyone. May it be so. Amen. Please rise and bow your spirit and join in singing our hymn.
Come
us some more about Pittsburgh for Immigrant Children, we have with us Ann Frederickson.
Thank you. I love this congregation, and thank you so much, Reverend McGaugh, for that really powerful sermon. Good morning. My name is Ann Frederickson, and I'm speaking today to acquaint you with Pittsburgh for Immigrant Children. And we have the PGH there to say Pittsburgh's got heart, and we really believe that. I formed this group 7 months ago, and I just want to thank you again for allowing us to speak about our mission here. Back in July, I was extremely distraught, as I'm sure all you were, by the images of immigrant children being separated from their parents at the border. I realized, because I do have a tendency to speak my mind on Facebook sometimes, that maybe just doing that was not enough to address the situation. Wanting to help in some way, I gathered my friends, and we determined that a more lasting solution might be to raise awareness of the challenges that unaccompanied children face and to fund their legal fees. We discovered that many unaccompanied children are right here in the Pittsburgh area and in 2 different facilities, one of which is Holy Family Institute. Of course, we wanted any of the money that we raised to be used wisely. So after doing a lot of research and meeting some of the organizations, we were happy to partner with JFCS, or Jewish Family and Community Services. JFCS has deep roots here in the Pittsburgh community, and they have an outstanding reputation for helping immigrants in a variety of situations. They have an accredited immigration legal services team that assists immigrants with a variety of needs. Any money that we raise through fundraising, speaking engagements, or our products is specifically earmarked for these unaccompanied minors. An important statistic is that while private attorneys typically charge $5,000 to $10,000, or $15,000, I should say, to represent a child, JCF's legal team can do it for only $800 to $1,000. This is critical because a child who is not represented has only a 17% chance of remaining in this country, while a child who is represented has an 85% chance of remaining in the United States. Since starting Pittsburgh for Immigrant Children, we have raised money through a variety of ways: direct donations, the sale of yard signs, card magnets, and note cards. The note cards are done by me, and I feel a special connection to this church because you allowed me to show my artwork last year. So I find it very interesting that I'm back here and special. We are now speaking to a variety of groups, and we hope to expand our reach, sharing what is really true about these children. I just wanted to share a couple brief facts. Many of these children have traveled over 1,000 miles just to get to the border, and they use a very deadly method of getting here, riding atop a vast network of freight trains. Many of these children will ride from 10 to 15 trains to get here, and that doesn't include the walking itself. Unfortunately, many do not survive. Overall, in Central America, the sex trafficking of children is rampant due to severe poverty, drought, corrupt government, and gangs. Of all trafficking victims, 60% are children. Most of these children, as Reverend McGaugh said, come from the Northern Triangle. 16% are under the age of 12, and they have been as young as 4 months. There are more boys than girls because so many boys are threatened by gangs to join or risk death to themselves or their families. We have a Facebook page. We encourage you to join. We're in the process of building a website. Our current motto is 20 in 20. to pay the legal fees for 20 children in 2020. We're excited to spread the word and are heartened to meet so many good people like you. After the service today, we have some of our fundraising items available, and we have information such as a way you can contact your congressman. But most of all, we want to thank you so much for sharing your designated offering with these children today. You humble us with your generosity. As I said to many people, who does that? So thank you so very much. I wanted to end with a testimony of a 12-year-old boy who is at Holy Family. The guys in the Mara gang started to tell me that I should join them. Once I said no, they started to harass me. I was so afraid of them that I stopped going to school. I remember when my older brother got in trouble with the Mara. They attacked him and cut his face with a machete. I knew then that I had to search for my parents in the United States. Thank you so much.
We'll now give and receive our morning offering. It's for immigrant children.
Please join me in reading the words for extinguishing our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet together again.
Just before our closing words, I want to mention that we're going to have a meeting here in the sanctuary in just a few minutes after the service to discuss the College of Social Justice trip to West Virginia, which we'll be taking this June. It's an informational meeting, so if you're at all interested, please hang around in the sanctuary, and that will start in just a few minutes. For now, we'll close with these words. May we see all as it is, and may it all be as we see it. May we be the ones to make it as it should be, for if not us, who? If not now, when. This is answering the cry of justice with the work of peace. This is redeeming the pain of history with the grace of wisdom. This is the work we are called to do, and this is the call we answer now. To be the barrier and the bridge, to be the living embodiment of our principles, to be about the work of building the beloved community, to be a people of intention and a people of conscience. Go in peace.
Would you like the song? That was terrific. Wow, that it looks so difficult. I bet you did. I mean, that really, it's not a harmony. It's just, it's beautiful about it. It's really beautiful. So wow. Or did you feel it? But once it happened there, but once you said it again, we were okay.
Cooking not baking. You don't want it in when I bake.
Yeah.
Even the recording that we listened to.
Tiene que ser